Thanks for joining me for this little bonus section after the book. This is where I followed my dad down to his basement, and we went and looked at some of his CDs, and he gives me a taste of some music history. Then we go and dig through his vinyl albums. Fortunately, I was using a camera which I had never really used before, and I think the power ran out when we got to some of the vinyl albums, but I did get a good chunk of it done. So we might have to revisit that at another date. Anyway, enjoy this.
Alright, so we are
They were on yesterday.
going to the nether regions here. To the basement.
Yeah. It'll be okay. Okay, let's start with the CDs.
So we are going into the basement of Ray's to explore his jazz collection. Let's see what we got.
All right.
Let's get some light going here.
Yeah.
I do like that your camera has a
Tony's
little.
painting?
Right? Ah. I always forgot Tony paints.
Yeah.
So now we're going into the dark room. You wind through these corridors of his photos. Get an idea here. Some of them. And here is the dark
All
room.
right. Let's pull this out over here.
All right, so we got CD collection, but we're about to get.
This is several
lecture.
boxes from the collection.
Dad, do you want me to lift?
Ones that have jazz.
You need me to lift that, or do you want to?
Yeah, hold on.
We'll have to find his vinyl collection.
I'm trying to get you Mingus and
Yeah,
let's take a look here.
let's take a look through.
I don't know that they're sorted anymore. They used to be. Dave Brubeck Quartet, Tim Mount, Charlie Mingus. Here's some of me.
Coming back.
Some of these out.
All right.
Barry Burton, John Coltrane.
All right. So these are the jazz CDs, but I also want to see
Mingus Allen.
Original.
Talking about this album yesterday. Mingus Allen.
So a lot of people don't know how you got into jazz and how you got into, you're talking about early 1950s when you're starting to find out about music.
Correct.
So how did you first find out your first, you're kind of living in the white redneck countryside, and all of a sudden you discover, jazz and soul and blues, and how did that happen?
Well, somewhere around the age of 13 or 14, I got an FM radio. FM was new then. One of the stations, I heard Earl Garner's Concert by the Sea. I didn't have a hi-fi or a stereo yet, and I went and bought that album and played it on the record players, what they were called, that I had. I liked that. It was kind of my introduction to jazz, but the real introduction came a couple years later when I met a fellow who was a few years older, and he was a real jazz buff, and he would take me to some of the jazz clubs in Washington to see some of the performers at the time. I was 16. It was a place you could get a beer. Nobody bothered you about that. It wasn't carded or anything. And I go and I was introduced to what was going on, which is a great music. And I saw there was the Showboat Lounge in Washington was the permanent home of Charlie Bird, who was a great jazz guitar player. And so I saw him often. And when he was away in the summertime, I saw his replacements, and two of them were well known. Mose Allison, who's still alive, and I think about 88 years old now. And then Toots Thielman, who was probably the world's best jazz harmonica player and a whistler. And almost every commercial you've ever heard on TV where it's whistled, he's the guy that's the whistler, because he had perfect tone. Also, I ran into a place called One Step Down, which was a little jazz club in Washington, where every Sunday had jam session, and Lenny Coogee, who was a vibraphonist, would play there. And so, that's where I started going. So at the age of 16, 17, and 18, I get introduced to jazz, discover Charlie Mingus. One of the times that I felt like I was almost killed was going to see Charlie Mingus driving up the Baltimore-Washington Parkway in the fog, only able to see maybe 50 feet ahead of you, and some guy almost slammed me from the rear. We were going up to see him play in Baltimore, and we never made the concert. After that, we were pretty scared, so we turned around and came back. But that was the introduction. So in the teen years, some 15 to 19, I'd already been into black music called rhythm and blues at the time by finding a couple stations and being introduced to Ray Charles, the Midnighters, and many of the Big Joe Turner, many of the singers of the 50s and their music. And then, of course, rock and roll came in about the same time, and so it all blended together.
Now, this was kind of still a racial period. Did you ever have problems that you were just some, goofy white Italian kid going into these black clubs in the 50s?
No. And in fact, one of the clubs that I used to go to was the performer was a guy named Phil Flowers, who was the big blues singer at the time in Washington. And when I was in college, he invited my date and I, Peggy Scogan, I think was her name, to join him at an after-hours black place where all the performers went at 1, 2 in the morning. So we went there, and we were the only two white people in there. It's not a problem at all. But several years after that, of course, came the Martin Luther King assassination and the riots, and everything changed drastically. I think I was pretty unaware of the civil rights problem until the civil rights era in 1963 and 64, when you started seeing it on TV.
Now, was it considered pretty counterculture to be into black music back then?
That's a good question. I don't know, because certainly the people who were my friends, we were all listening to the same music. So,
did your parents ever be like, turn that crap down?
No. Yeah, I did get a hi-fi. I built a hi-fi, an ICO hi-fi, and put it in the basement of my parents' house, and would blast away and down there. And my parents would very kindly once in a while say, we're going to bed now. Can you turn that down a bit?
What do you mean you built a hi-fi? Back in the day, you'd buy it and have to assemble it?
You could buy either a Heath kit or an ICO kit, and you could actually solder the wires and follow the instructions and build your hi-fi from scratch. So you build your amplifier is what you're doing. Then I got some speakers and finished the wood around them, and connected it, and had probably the first stereo that anybody I knew had. Stuck it in the basement. When we had parties and stuff, that's where the music came from.
All right. So we're going to go through your jazz collection, but I do want to start also with your vinyls. You still have some original vinyls you got in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and let's go look at those, because it'll take a few moments to just pull you some stuff that you should record today. You can take all the time you want to look at boxes of CDs, but the vinyls have become a real rarity, so we'll have to take a walk.
Okay. Wait, say that again. So this is a patent.
Yeah, this is a patent that was issued to Joseph DeFilippis for a toothbrush, I think in 1917.
So who's Joseph again?
Uncle Joe, my mom's brother.
He had a patent for an electric toothbrush?
Yeah, where the paste came out the bottom. And
how did you find this?
I don't know. I don't remember now, but I did find it, and
wow, 1933. So how long did these patents last?
17 years.
So Sonic doesn't owe us any money, or?
No. And in fact, just 2 years ago, I got a patent with my friend Don Ardell on some speed transition shoes. So that was the first patent I ever got, even though I've been practicing patent law forever.
Very cool, man. I love this.
Ray Charles, again, back in the stuff he was making on Atlantic. I Got a Woman is from the 50s. The Right Time, What I Say, Mess Around, all that stuff. I was all over the place. I like black music, I like jazz. Mingus is the greatest of all, for me, jazz people. jazz bassist who wrote amazing music. Played Blue Boy Slim in the Sex Change Band.
Oh my gosh, you got his autograph. Look at that.
The fabulous Blue Boy. It was a
Wait,
Yale
let me get
grad who
this.
dropped out and died of drugs, heroin in 1938, and made fantasy, or not fantasy, but like Weird Al Yankovic rock and roll songs with very funny titles and themes like Dare to Be Fat, because fat's where it's at, Christmas at Kmart, Boogie Till You Puke. Those are all
When did he
wonderful
die? In
hits.
the 60s? Or
He died at 38 years old, maybe 20 years ago.
oh, okay, 38 years old.
Yeah. Let's see. These are all mixed up. There's some rock and some Cal Jader.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Cal Jader again. Then you go back to the 50s. This is rhythm and blues in the 50s. The Drifters, Ruby Baby, songs like that. Under the Boardwalk was one of theirs. This is one of my first albums, and this was an introduction to Afro-Cuban jazz. And in addition to the nice cover,
Hell of a cover there.
it had a nice
Whoa.
everything that Fantasy Records did back then was put on a colored disc.
Fancy.
So this is Cal Jader again, and lovely music. And Bolasete. This is one of my most recent purchases. By that I mean 20 years ago, because I heard him playing at Montreal Jazz Festival, and it was pretty amazing music. So I went out and got his Bossa Nova. Bossa Nova was introduced into the United States from Brazil by Charlie Bird, the guy I just mentioned, from the Showboat Lounge. He and Stan Getz. He went to Brazil on behalf of the United States government for a tour, and he heard Bossa Nova, and he brought it back. He called Stan Getz, who was a great saxophone player, said, "You got to hear this music. Come to Washington. I'm going to do a recording." They went to the Unitarian Church up on 14th Street and made the Girl from Impanina.
Wow.
And
That happened right here.
yeah, and they'd had its 50th anniversary just a year ago, and they had a big thing about it. But the original Bossa Nova album by Stan Getz and Charlie Bird was a result of Charlie Bird's trip there. Here's Charlie Bird with Lorendo Almeida. I think I took Tom Lupo, your brother, to see the two of them play in Washington. Bird was getting up in years. This is 20 years ago. He died maybe 15 years ago.
Thanks so much for joining me for this bonus section. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it yet, go back and look at the whole book. I worked really hard on it. Go look at it. Anyway, I'll see you. I will keep putting material up as I keep filming it, and I've got a little more, some recipes I think we've got in store, and we still got to do my dad's photo book. So I'm hoping next time I'm in town we can sit down and do another book. Until then, thanks for joining us.